not much of a public speaker, so you can crowd a little bit if you want. My name's Gus Menary. I'm the first pair of collaborators tonight. The work you see behind me is Ashley Elander's work. Very lovely, wood burning. When Mary first asked me and Ashley to do something together, I sat down and I made a list of all the little things that sort of mattered to me. And those of you who know me know this, and those of you who don't can probably tell, but my stomach plays a very central role in my day-to-day operations. So it was without any surprise, but a lot of spiraling depression, that the first 5 things on my list were all food-related. Number 1 of which being BLT on California sourdough bread. Right? You know where the bread is a little toasted, but the bacon's still a little chewy, and the lettuce and the tomatoes stay crispy. And, yeah, maybe a little avocado, maybe some sprouts. But I don't want to do that, because this isn't going to be a love song for fatties. And knowing my luck, the person who's going to come up after me is going to talk about the little things being the light in a child's eyes. It's, I guess, a Christmas present that for the first time isn't a McDonald's toy, and you're going to be like, what was that other guy talking about? Tacos? Yeah, fuck it. So I tried to find something that was a little bit more relatable, and the first place I looked was within relationships that I had had, something little that meant a lot to me. And the first thing I thought of was this woman who I had a relationship with about 3 years ago. And we had a very innocent relationship, not chaste, but very lovey-dovey. And I would say twee, but I'm not 100% sure what that word means. But we both shared this really sort of sick fascination with serial killers. That's a little window into my world. And so one of my fondest memories is us being together in bed, blankets buffeted against the Chicago night, and both of us reading about really terrible people. And her turning to me and saying something like, you know, Carl Panzram used to dispose of his bodies in vats of acid, leaving nothing but little bits of bone and tooth for the victim to be identified by. And me saying something like, man, I fucking love you. But really, I sort of ran into a problem in thinking and talking about that, because I realized that that little thing was more wholly representative of the love I had for her in its entirety. And that's been sort of the challenge of this piece, was the more you dissect the little things in your life, the more you realize how big they actually are. How can I talk about a way in which I loved someone without talking about all the love I had for them, or just love in general? And like, how could I talk about the abuelitas on their porches in Logan, and the West African men who barbecue and dance with their children in Edgewater, without just telling you guys about how much I love Chicago in the summertime? And not to sound too John Lennon-y about it, but love is not a little thing, and not to sound too Studs Terkel-y about it, but Chicago in the summertime is a big fucking deal. So I was sort of hard-pressed to find something little that could stay little. Maybe about 3, 4, I actually don't even really remember, some years ago, they filmed a movie here in Chicago called Public Enemies. And you may remember, it was directed by Michael Mann, who had made a bet with Steven Spielberg as to whether or not he could make John Dillinger's life seem incredibly boring. And he really did succeed. He's a genius director. But for the exterior shots in this movie, they restored some old sort of Prohibition-era L trains, and they had them running between Addison and Belmont for these sort of exterior shots. And you couldn't ride on these trains, but every now and then you'd see one of them go by. So one night I was coming home somewhat drunkenly at around 1 o'clock in the morning, which is kind of late or really early, depending on where you are in your life right now. And, yeah, right, really early. We'll see tonight. So I was all alone on this train, other than this group of Japanese tourists. And you're like, well, how do you know they were Japanese? And let's just call it a hunch. We'll move on from there. But one of these trains passed right by us, and I noticed that only one girl out of this group of tourists saw it go by. And she stood sort of agog, mouth gaping, as this luminescent train with this amber glow sped by us into the night like Chicago's own Flying Dutchman, or whatever that boat was that when they found it no one was on board, but like the food was still warm, you know. I don't know. I'm still working on that metaphor, but I saw but couldn't understand her try to explain to her friends what she saw. And I saw but couldn't understand her friends not believe her. But she stuck to her guns. She knew what she saw. She wasn't about to be talked out of it. And I watched her friend's disbelief turn to mockery. And in a moment of like desperation, she turned to me with this look in her eyes like, please tell them you saw this. Like, please let them know that I'm not crazy, that this thing actually happened and we experienced it together. And incredibly quickly, like faster than anything I've ever done in my life, I looked out the window and pretended like I didn't see it. And that seems probably pretty mean. So, like serial killers, these people hanging out to dry. But I like to think that she went back to Japan or wherever it was she was from with this idea of Chicago being this city with a yawning lake that stretches from south to north, and these tall metropolitic buildings that sort of reach towards the sky, and fucking ghost trains that haunt our night and clang along the rails, cursed never to put into station.
Or express train.
Yeah, or express train. But when I hear the train screeching through the 3 a.m. blackness, I really do believe her to be right. And that's the little thing for me. That's the special thing for me, is that my view of Chicago is shared by only one other person in this world, whom I've never met and lives completely on the other side of it. So yeah, that's what we finally settled on. Thank you very much.